Welcome to today's episode of the podcast where we're finally getting to review the movie that we've been anticipating for months.
Yeah.
Because originally it was supposed to come out November of last year.
Stupid strike.
The stupid strike, which so many movies have fallen victim to, or I should say so many movie goers have fallen victim to. But I will say, having said that, felt really timely for a movie like this to come out because we went through sort of a dry spell there in February.
Yeah.
And I was ready for a new good movie.
We had to resort to reviewing Madam Web.
We did, which again was so much fun to review, even though the movie itself wasn't fun. And we really don't want to be people who are known for negativity, but there is something real to the whole, like, it's kind of more fun to bash something.
I think once a year on the podcast, we need to commit ourselves to just bashing a movie. It's just it's very therapeutic almost. You get to get out all your negativity.
Exactly. Just for catharsis. You know
what I'm not negative about is the movie going week that you and I had this week.
And
I'm not really getting into any spoilers because we've already done a Terminator 2, but we saw Terminator 2 and Dune in the same week.
Yes, we did. So, and that, I realize we're now 2 minutes into the podcast and haven't mentioned that what we're doing today is talking about Dune Part 2, which I think is important. That Part 2 is an important distinction. It's not just Dune 2 because the Part 1 ended not at a normal ending point.
Correct.
This is a Part 2 that was necessary. Even though they didn't film it till afterwards, it wasn't one of those they filmed it all at once. But they greenlit this one as soon as the first one opened to a really good box office.
And a lot of acclaim.
Yeah, but it would have been very strange. I don't know what they would have done if the first one didn't open to big box office success, because we would have just had a movie that was incomplete.
Yeah.
So,
and it would have been really frustrating.
It would have been a really strange occurrence, to be sure.
Yep.
So, Dune Part 2. Part 1 was my favorite movie of 2021. That said, 2021 kind of notoriously not a great movie year, the COVID year, but to me it was the movie that was oh, thank goodness we got Dune. It was a great movie. I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed Denis Villeneuve as a director, even though I'm never sure I say his name correctly.
No, if you notice, I've never once attempted to say his name on this podcast.
I just don't want to be real redneck American. Denis Villeneuve.
I'm just going to call him Dennis.
Probably should. So Dennis,
what a guy!
I was looking at IMDb and I was kind of shocked. What a run this guy had.
He's got a great IMDb.
3 years in a row: Sicario, Arrival, Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah,
and then again, a lot of extenuating circumstances like the strike and things going on. Dune Part 1 and 2 over the next 7 years. So 3 years in a row, 3 bangers, and then 7 year stretch. He's got these 2 movies. So. We talk often about how passion project is kind of it gives you some pause when directors are. This was a passion project for Dennis, and the time that he put into it shows that. This is thankfully an example of a passion project working out. So, just trying to again set the stage.
Sure.
Part 1 being one of my favorite. Being a big fan of the director, and he's just banger after banger. This one just had everything that you could possibly want to get me excited for a movie coming out.
Yeah,
and I think probably just right off the bat should just say, how did you feel about it?
I loved it. I know that's not any kind of real original creative take, but you had made the point a couple weeks ago, or at some point, you and I were just talking off camera, and you were like, man, I'm just excited that there's a movie coming out that's worth being excited about. You said something along those lines, and I was excited too. And like you said, it has been a dry spell. I mean, it really has. February was brutal for good movie. The best movie I've seen lately is Terminator 2, which is 33 years old. So I was really excited to see this. And it's really funny, I kind of have a different experience than you did, where I just kind of missed Dune 1. I knew it was a thing. I knew it was coming out. I figured it was probably a movie I would like. And somehow I just didn't see it. I don't remember what happened. I don't know what happened. I just didn't catch it in the theater. And so I was kind of late to the game. Watched it, really, really liked it. And then, had a lot of anticipation for this movie. And I think it completely lived up to all the hype and the anticipation. I had a great time with it. It was an amazing IMAX movie. It was a great IMAX movie. I mean, you IMAXed it as well. We didn't see
Yeah.
it together. Like there was parts where like it was shaking, and the spectacle and all the words that are being, visionary and all these words that are being thrown out for this movie, I think are deserved.
Yeah. So I also loved it.
Yeah.
Not surprisingly. And that said, I'm a little worried about this podcast because I was having flashbacks to our Killers of the Flower Moon podcast where I was like, I love this movie.
But
I'm going to have a lot of thoughts that are going to make it
Sure.
sound like I didn't love this movie, but I did.
Mhm.
I just walked away with a lot of thoughts about the movie that are going to sound like I'm criticizing the movie. I hope it doesn't come across that way because I love this movie.
Right.
But I think the problem is most of the things that I could say good about it can be said very simply.
Yeah.
There's more good than there is bad, but that's gonna be very simple. This movie looks amazing.
Right.
The cinematography is great. The direction, the filmmaking, everything about the making of this is of the highest quality.
Yeah.
So, but here's gonna be basically my summary of what I feel about it though.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this movie is more Avatar 2 than Lord of the Rings 2. And this is what I mean by that. I know we probably have said comments about Avatar, especially in reference to James Cameron and wishing he would do other things, that make it sound like I just hate Avatar. I had loved both Avatars as a theater experience. Blown away by them, amazed by them, thought they were special. I gave Avatar 2 an A- rating, which I hardly give anything A's in my rankings because it was one of my favorite theater experiences I've ever had watching Avatar 2. My problem is I just don't really want to revisit those worlds. Once we get past the amazing spectacle of it, I don't know that there's enough to grab me.
It's not a real engaging story.
Right. Whereas Lord of the Rings 2, which has aged somewhat now, but that was a movie I just kept revisiting. And the reason I brought both those up is they were both theatrical spectacles, but one of them kind of really took root in my, in my movie heart and my life.
Sure. And
one of them, yeah. And so I feel bad because I do think Dune 2 is better story-wise than Avatar 2. I don't think it's like that. But what I mean is I think almost everything that I love about it was the great spectacle. It was it was how great it looked on a big screen. How I think the downgrade to watching it at home is going to be very significant.
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And again, I feel so bad that sounds like I'm bad mouthing the movie. I'm not. It's a movie that's made to be a big spectacle. Mm-hmm. He says he's a visual director. He shot it in IMAX. I watched it the way it's meant to be watched and loved it. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to sound like I'm bad mouthing it when I say I don't think it's going to have quite the legs that some other movies are going to have.
That's fair. I have in my notes. I'll just go ahead and say this. I love this movie. It did not crack into that elite status for me.
Yeah.
And that's not I'm like you, that's not an insult to the movie because you can't put every movie in your elite. I'm talking, the Jaws, the Goodfellas, I'm talking elite status for me.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't crack that. And that's okay.
I had a friend go see the movie with me. I went to see it with two friends, and one of them who I don't think goes to see a lot of movies like I do.
Sure.
Afterwards, he said, I'm just going to say it. He goes, I think that was the best movie I've ever seen in theaters. And, I waited a few minutes while he's talking about it, and I said, hey, can I just tell you? I said, not even close to cracking my top 10 favorite movies I've seen in theaters. Mm-hmm. Now, granted, I've seen a ton of movies in theaters. So, it's not an insult. It's just, like you said, it's not that upper pantheon.
It's not
a movie. So again, loved this movie. Can I be more
Dennis,
clear
if you're
about
listening,
that?
we love
Dennis,
your movie.
Yeah, we love it. So let's talk about some of the things that are really great about this movie. Sure. I wrote 3 words that I attribute all to Dennis. Mm-hmm. We talk about this all the time. It's got a great tone to the movie. It knows exactly what it should be. Mm-hmm. And it just strikes
doesn't try to be anything other than what it should be.
It strikes the right tone throughout. We already said the visuals, the cinematography, just the way it looks, everything is incredible.
It is.
And then this kind of goes along with tone, but atmosphere. Mm-hmm. It's got just a great atmosphere to it. Mm-hmm. That sort of helps create that whatever emotion you're supposed to be feeling during the movie, it always gets you to that emotional place. Mm-hmm. A big part of that is another note I wrote: the music. Hans Zimmer. I mean,
he
is on the Mount Rushmore of movie composers, and still crushing it
1,000%.
with this movie. Almost every time I see a movie that has great music, afterwards, as I'm thinking about the movie and like thinking fondly over it, and the music's kind of playing in my head, I'm like, music is so important to a movie. I don't think I give enough credence to it. I don't think I credit the music enough.
Vitally important.
When the music is great, it takes a movie to a whole new level. I mean, as I was thinking about that, I was like, I love Rocky. I can't imagine Rocky without all of the great Rocky music and themes into it. It takes you emotionally to those places.
It takes
when
it to
those songs.
Yeah, the movie can take you so far, and then the music or the song can push it over the edge.
Or even something a little more modern like Avengers. That Avengers theme.
Yeah.
That Avengers theme needle dropping when Avengers assemble.
It's almost impossible not to get pumped up.
If you put a different sound with or different song with it, of course, people will do this on social media, like the importance of music, and put some silly song with it. It makes it, but I think even more than just being good music, because obviously they could have written some other different piece of good music that somehow fits. Like we said, the tone, the atmosphere, the visual of the movies. So I'm not a music guy, so I don't know how these composers do it.
I
don't know how he creates these songs or the music that fits. I'm watching, I'm just going, yes, that is the appropriate Dune theme.
Yeah.
That just makes sense in Dune.
Well, it's a great marriage between Dennis and Hans Zimmer, because, Dune, like you said, is made to be that big spectacle, and Hans Zimmer's music is made to fit inside of a movie that is a big he does a lot of Nolan's, maybe all of Nolan's movies, I don't know. So it's just a great marriage.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Were there any other particular strengths you want to talk to? Again, I feel bad that I'm already done with strengths, but mainly just because, I mean, how much you want to go through each shot and tell you how beautiful it was?
No, I mean, mine are anything but original or unique thoughts. But, you literally cannot talk about this movie without talking about just the visuals of it. And like we always talk about, it's like we don't want to sound like we're hypocrites on here, because, we've both been critical of, just these CGI fests and stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm not against, these big CGI, big visual kind of things. It's just, if you're going to do it, do it.
Yeah.
And this movie, this meets that criteria, and it doesn't feel, it's amazing. One thing I thought was really cool is how they managed to make this movie such a visual spectacle and stuff, but it doesn't feel like a gimmick.
No. Well, and I think maybe one of the good ways to say it would be, there's nowhere in the movie where you feel money wasted.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it.
Whatever the budget this movie is, you see the budget on the screen. You're like, yeah, that makes sense. Whatever you would tell me, you could tell me $200 million. I'd be like, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because this movie looks like $200 million. Yeah. It looks great.
So I had, just the visual. I had the same kind of thing, however you want to phrase it, the atmosphere, the tone, all that kind of stuff. I've talked about this before. I like it when we just are dropped into a world that is interesting.
Yeah.
And this definitely qualifies.
Yeah. They do a great job, too, of not over-explaining, as we talk about all the time.
Yeah. You don't know every detail. You don't know every piece of history leading up to this moment. There's some things that are left ambiguous. I appreciate that.
For sure. And this one, I mean, it's a pendulum that will swing both ways, because I'll kind of bring this up in the negatives too. But they definitely trust the audience to be smart enough that they don't have to feed you everything. Now, sometimes I need a little more detail on that, but I am glad they don't over-explain.
I am too. And then I just wrote down the cast.
Yeah.
I thought everybody delivered. I thought everybody was great. And when you have a movie like this, when there's, I mean, you can probably name 15 recognizable stars, without even really trying. So not everyone gets to be the center of attention, but I thought everyone delivered exactly how they needed to deliver in the movie.
Yeah. So that was one of the things I wrote. And I actually wrote this as kind of we'll say kind of a neutral, because I think the cast is amazing, like you said. I was going through and just writing, like, who could I remember off the top of my head this morning without looking it up? I was like, Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, Rebecca Ferguson, Javier Bardem, Stellan Skarsgård, Josh Brolin, Austin Butler, Florence Pugh, Christopher Walken, and of course I was forgetting Dave Bautista, and I was forgetting, others. Like you said, there's multiple others that I recognize, and I was like, okay, they were all really good. That said, this was not and it's the nature of the film, not meant to be like
It's
an
not an
acting piece.
acting showcase.
Like, none of these actors are going to get nominated for an Oscar, and I'm okay with that
Me
because
too.
that's not what it's supposed to be.
It's not an acting showcase.
Most of the characters are kind of one-note characters because that's not what the movie is. It's not a character study.
It's not a deep character study.
So
right.
what they did is they got great actors
who look great up on the IMAX screen.
Yeah, it's kind of like a lot what we talked about with Nolan's Oppenheimer. Now, Cillian Murphy had a lot to do in that movie, but most of the characters are very small parts that have one note to do, but he just kept filling them with big actors that made it feel more significant. Each part feel more profound than it was. And that's what all these actors did.
Just adds a little bit of weight to the performance.
I mean, when Josh Brolin's the random like soldier guy who pops up and has very little to do, very little lines, but it just seems more significant when it's Josh Brolin because Josh Brolin has a presence and a history with him.
Yes. I thought the exact same thing about Javier Bardem.
Yeah.
You could have gotten anybody to play that part, but there's just something about having him on there. It just makes the movie feel more important, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a successful strategy when done by a good filmmaker.
Yeah. Also, I didn't even think about it until after the movie, just as a fun aside, that Josh Brolin and Javier Bardem were together. And I was like, oh, the guys from No Country for Old Men. Of course, they both look so different in this movie than
There's
that
no
movie.
comparisons to those two movies.
Yeah.
So that was a big plus. And I don't know if we'll get into this later, so you can stop me if this is a spoiler, but I thought Zendaya just came out of this movie looking like $1 million.
Did you?
I did. Not necessarily, like you said, it's not an acting showcase.
Yeah.
She's just a star. And she's up on that IMAX screen, and I think she's believable as a fighter. She's believable in, even though the love story is not at all really the point of this movie, she's believable. Her chemistry with Chalamet was believable. she's a star.
See, I think she's fine. Yeah. I actually didn't I didn't love her. I think she does a really good job of playing. How do I put this? Grouchy. We'll put grouchy. She does a really good job playing grouchy, and I kind of feel like she leans into that very heavily in this one.
I just thought, and again, not even necessarily specifically for her performance, just her presence. Maybe I like her in the Spider-Man movies. I thought, this movie really favored her, that big IMAX screen, and they have the blue eyes in the movie, and I just thought this is a movie star that's going to be around for a long time. So I don't even necessarily mean her performance blew me away.
Right.
I just thought star.
Yeah. Let's talk through a couple of the performances, just because I'm curious as your take. And not even necessarily in this movie, just where are you with Chalamet in general?
I'm probably not as high as a lot of people are, only because to me, he's just never done that movie that really connects with me. He's good. I mean, there's no denying that, I don't think.
Yeah.
But if Wonka is supposed to be the Timothée Chalamet's showcase, that movie doesn't interest me. I haven't seen it. I've had opportunities where I could have. We've talked about it when we did some of our big all-day movie marathons. I was like, okay, Wonka is playing in 30 minutes. And I was like, you know what? I'll just wait an hour and go watch The Iron Claw.
Yeah.
So I like him. I have no doubt he's got a long, successful career ahead of him. I just haven't gotten that performance out of him where I'm like, man, this is my movie, and I'm connected to this performance, and I want to rewatch this performance over and over again.
Yeah, I think we're pretty aligned then, because I'm with you. I'm like, he's obviously a really talented guy.
He's handsome guy. Looks nice up on the big screen.
Great looking, and I could make fun of it, but the reality is it's not that easy to be like, okay, now I need you to smolder on screen and look really serious and cool. If it was that easy, then I would do it, but I can't do it.
I can't do it, and he can.
He can. I just am curious, what that role would be for him, because I guess I'm still trying to figure out what kind of actor he is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because it's clearly you can tell just by his look, he could pull off the kind of the art house indie stuff. But then he doesn't seem out of place in these big spectacles or anything like that. He's avoided the MCU and stuff like that. So maybe that's part of the problem too. I'm like, where's his place? Where is he? So I don't know. I mean, he's good. I have no doubt he has a huge career ahead of him. I'm just waiting for that performance in a movie that I really connect with.
Yeah. And the last one I want to ask you about is Austin Butler. Where are you with Austin Butler? I
like Austin Butler. I really do. I know there was a lot of thoughts about Elvis. People had a lot of thoughts. I saw where some people thought it was one of the worst movies, blah, blah, blah. I thought he did a really good job as Elvis.
I'm with you. I thought he did a great job as Elvis. Where I'm struggling with Austin Butler is I'm currently trying to make my way through Masters of the Air on Apple, and he's in that. And just as a whole, the show is just, I'm 4 episodes in, and it's just, I'm waiting for it to catch me. And Austin Butler is just doing like, I'm going to be a movie star, Austin Butler, and like, he hardly says anything, and he's just kind of like, always got a toothpick, and just kind of like, it's like they're saying, Austin Butler, your scene is just sit there and look cool. Like, go. And he's just like,
you could just,
just like, and it's just, I'm like, I really hope he doesn't lean into that. And I feel
and maybe this was a step away from that, where he's unrecognizable.
I was about to say, and that's what made me like this performance. Is like, and I don't think that it's his intention to do it, because again, great work in, of course, we love him in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
He's great in that movie.
Almost real as a donut.
Yep. Oh my gosh, one of our favorite lines.
Yes. Great as Elvis. Great in this one. I guess my fear is that people will want him to. I think he wants to be a character actor. My fear is that people want him just to be
Austin Butler.
Yeah, like be more like Masters of the Air. Like, Austin, we just want you to be heartthrob, just look cool, just don't do anything. And he could make probably great money doing that.
Probably.
So it's gonna be like, Austin Butler, please just keep being a character actor and doing interesting things like this.
I thought he was really good. I saw something online a couple days before the movie came out where it was like, Austin Butler is one of the all-time great movie villains. I think that's a little of an exaggeration.
Definitely overstated.
Yeah, I was like, whoa, now. Like, and I saw him compared to Javier Bardem in No Country for Old Men. And I was like, no. That's incorrect.
Not even a little bit, no.
And I don't even know what the source was. I was just kind of scrolling, I think, through Instagram. So it could have just been some schmo. I don't know. But no, he's good. He's good. Not a real, and again, I'm like you. I don't want to sound negative, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but it's like the characters and the character depth is not the point of this movie.
Right.
And I do think the Austin Butler, like, that's an example.
Yeah.
Where it's like he just shows up on the screen just to be the bad guy.
Right.
And you don't really understand. Like, honestly, if you were like, what are his motivations? Why is he doing what he's doing in this movie? I'd have to stop and think for a while. I'm not 100% sure. So
yeah,
he's good, but let's not go crazy and say he's one of the all-time great villains.
Right. And that was, again, my one friend who said it was his favorite movie he's seen in theaters. That was his one note, was he said, the Austin Butler villain character, a little underdeveloped.
A little bit.
I was like,
a little bit.
Yeah.
But he was appropriately, creepy and menacing, and he looked cool.
And the thing about it is they gave him a fair amount of screen time. Like when you say underdeveloped, it's just, again, it's not what serves the story, is be like, let's get into his psyche.
Right.
The time they spent with him was part of the spectacle.
Yeah.
Okay, we're on his home planet. We're in this arena. He's
Definitely.
fighting. Like, that's what we want you focused on, not.
And he delivered, because on the flip side of that, had they spent a lot of time with character development, we might be sitting here going, I don't need to know this guy's whole backstory, so, no, yeah, I like Austin Butler. I'm sure he's another one that's got a big career ahead of him.
Yeah. Be interested to see whatever, I can't remember the name of the new movie he's got coming out with the
Bike Riders
movie. Is it called Bike Riders?
I think it's called Bike Riders.
Tom Hardy.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see that, because that's one that I'm like, it could be him doing something interesting. It could be him going, I'm just going to be Austin Butler.
It could be a nice marriage of the two.
Could be.
So, yeah, I'm interested in seeing
the fact that Tom Hardy's in it kind of makes me a little more optimistic, because Tom Hardy's definitely a guy who could have just been Tom Hardy. And he's like, no, I want to do interesting things every time.
I want to do interesting things and hide my face at all costs.
That's right.
Yeah. And I just want to say one more quick thing about cast. I don't know if you'll think I'm ridiculous or not. I like Dave Bautista as an actor.
He's good.
He's really good. Like, he over-delivers all the time. I mean, he's a wrestler turned actor, and you just go, okay. And he just is consistently good in movies. Now, he didn't have a whole lot to do here, but he does not stick out in a bad, like, you're not like, oh, this guy trying to be an actor. I think he's good.
He is, I don't want to overdo it, but I want to say fearless in that, like, he doesn't mind, like, in this movie, he's playing just kind of a sleazy, cowardly character.
And then he just,
like, nothing great about
gets killed,
him.
And he's off screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not saying he's like the next De Niro or anything, but I just think, like, I like this guy.
Yeah.
He's got a cool look about him. He's willing to try things in movies, and he was in Blade Runner 2049 too. He was really good in that, in a small part.
which I was thinking of after this movie. That I was like, yeah, I wonder if. I mean, not to say Batista wouldn't have been up for this movie anyways, but there's a little bit of like, yeah, Denis was the first guy to cast me as just like a normal guy and say like, I think you can act. I'm gonna put you in the scene. I want you to just be serious. And it was great. And he's probably like, yeah, I'll be anything that Dennis wants me in.
Yeah. So kudos to him. I'm always happy when someone kind of, rises above maybe what the expectations were for them as an actor. Yeah. So kudos to him.
Yeah. All right. So I do want to talk with some of my nitpicks of the movie, some of the weaknesses. So, this is what I wrote. I wrote pacing was kind of skippy with like the editing. And I just wrote too much story. And this is when I wrote, I think this needed to be 3 parts. I think it needed to be Dune part 1, part 2, and part 3, which is unbelievable to say that's all based on one book. And it kind of made me think this must be why they called it like an unfilmable book, because it gets into so much stuff that I was like, really, I think if you take both Dune movies and just look at them as one continuous story, and it's almost like concentric circles as far as like how focused is on the time that passes. And like the first movie starts really like small and it's really focused, and as it goes and it goes, the circle just gets larger and larger, and then it's just covering more and more time, and by the end it's just like we're packing in all this story in not a lot of time. And I think it's sort of meant to grow like that and get bigger and grander, but I'm sitting there going like, okay, the first movie I really praised for its pacing. Like, man, it lets scenes breathe, it develops. And then the second movie, I felt like the original cut had to be 5 hours, and to get it down to this, they just had to be like, chop, 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 chop. Let's get rid of this. And so now scenes are just going from here to here to here.
Yeah.
And it didn't feel like it had that same like, we're going to let everything breathe pace that the first one had. It felt like we don't have time to let this breathe, so we've got to get to the next thing. Jump to the next thing. And so it didn't, like I said, I like that they don't force feed everything, but some things just felt rushed.
Yeah.
In this one to get all of that story packed in there.
I agree.
And then it made me question some of the like, okay, so the first like 30 minutes of the movie moves very slow.
Yes.
And not in a way that like I dislike it. It just, again, it really lets things breathe. It's like takes its time. But we're like 30 minutes in, and I'm like, okay, I know they got a lot to accomplish in this movie. They better get going. And then just like the last hour just felt like things were moving so fast. Yeah. Everything was, and I was like, I wish they had more time to let all this be explained out and play out, because it made some of the conclusions feel very unsatisfying to me.
Yes, that's really well put.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I thought, I just noticed where it would just jump to like, okay, Zendaya and Timothée Chalamet are just talking in the sand, and then it just kind of jumps, and it's like, okay, now let's jump over here and see what the bad guys are up to, and then we kind of jump backwards to, now they're back in the sand, but then all of a sudden there's this attack, and it did have a weird kind of flow to it.
Yeah, there was one cut where I'm pretty sure it was Chalamet and Zendaya in one place, and then the next cut was they were attacking a thing, and I had no sense of time, like, I thought they were going to do something else, but now they're here attacking this thing. I'm like, there had to be some story between there that got cut that just made it jump so aggressively.
Yeah, and to me, where the weirdest thing where the kind of the pacing or whatever you want to call it, the movie came into play was when they were like, okay, Chalamet, in order to pass this test, you have to venture out into the desert.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah,
that was just.
That's where that rough cut.
Is that where that was?
She was going to help him go through the desert,
and all of a sudden she's just sitting there.
Well, I would say, and then she helps him. She's showing him like how things work.
Yeah.
And then it cuts to a whole bunch of them raiding that machine.
That's what it is.
Wait, is he done passing the desert test?
Yeah, and that was kind of never resolved, and that was really clumsy, I thought.
Yeah. It's sort of the same thing with when he had to drink the water of life, the blue goo from the worms. Like that got really choppy in the editing too, to kind of push it through.
I have more thoughts on the blue goo. I have some thoughts I'll get to.
So yeah, just overall, it just felt like too much story. So the other thing that, and we're getting into spoiler territory now, so people don't want to listen, please, like,
we should almost just make this like, this is a spoiler podcast, every episode we do.
So when it gets to the end, when I talk about some of it being unsatisfying, so you've got the big bad being Stellan Skarsgård, and then you got the new bad being Austin Butler brought in. But then the Emperor, who's over in charge of all of it, comes in at the end. And when the Emperor comes in, Stellan Skarsgård's immediately like, it just kind of like cuts his legs out from under him.
Yeah.
And suddenly it's like, okay, so we spent 5 hours of movie building up to him being the big bad, and now we're just brushing him aside in favor of the Emperor being here, being more important. The whole last battle was really fast.
Yes.
And honestly, throughout the whole movie, all I could think was they didn't do anything to make the bad guys feel hard to beat.
No.
The good guys were just kicking their butts the whole time.
The whole time.
Kind of like, do they even need Chalamet for this? Like,
Yeah.
It really seemed like all they had to do was just guerrilla warfare and then giant worms attack them. Like,
and I was really disappointed with how easily they took care of Dave Bautista's character.
Yeah.
He just kind of walked up to him, and really it wasn't even much of a struggle, and then he just got stabbed.
Yeah. So this is another criticism I have of it. I don't think the action in the movie was great. I think it's just like dipped in great visuals and atmosphere, but when it comes to the actual action, like you're saying, that fight, like that was a build up for like, let's have a great fight. Even the final fight between Austin Butler's character and I'm trying to remember that guy's name. It's like Fade Rotha or something like that. So
I
Fade Rotha
made in my mind I wasn't
Paul,
going to try and say everyone's name.
Yeah. So Fade Rotha and Paul have this duel. Cool choice to use like no music, and it's just. But as far as like the choreography, I'm like, this is going to be very forgettable.
We've talked about it before. Now that we're in the era of John Wick and Mission Impossible, the bar is high.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying every movie has to be like John Wick or Mission Impossible, but when it comes to stunts or combat or any of these things, the bar is high.
Yeah.
And we're past the days, I think, where just a so-so fight is going to cut it.
Yeah. So the best parts of the action are the really broad shots of like a lot going on in the visuals. Those are amazing. It's when it zooms in that I think the choreography and the stunt work is like, yeah, we spent all our attention on the broad shots, the big setup of what's happening, and not enough on like the zoomed in close up what's happening.
And it's so hard because there's a part of me that really appreciates that the climax of this movie is a one person versus another person, no music, knife fight.
Yeah.
Because I feel like if it was different, I'd be sitting there going, well, we've seen these giant, like Lord of the Rings type battles with thousands of members of these opposing armies. And I feel like I maybe would have been a little bored with that. So I did appreciate that it was just these two guys, no music, knives. But you're right. It just left you going, well, okay, that was a thing that happened.
Even how Chalamet wins with you don't see it happening. You think he's getting stabbed, but the other guy got stabbed. And it's like, okay, cool little fake out. How did he pull that off?
Yeah.
What happened
when exactly? Did he stab him?
Yeah. It just, I don't know. The action left me a little cold. So here's my, all right, Jeremy. So what would you do to fix the movie? Like if it was perfect in your eyes. So obviously we've talked about it. I'd like the action to be a little more, little more planned out, thought out, clever. But really, when it comes to the story development, I wish they would have leaned a little more into the whole is the Paul character this Messiah character or not? I thought what was the most interesting thing about the movie was his conflict of I'm not this guy, but I need to lean into being this guy to lead the people. Zendaya's whole like anti there being this prophecy and that's how they enslave you type deal. And then all of that was really interesting to me. It was just really secondary to the visual storytelling in the movie.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think it got really interesting sort of in the middle, but by the end, there was really interesting things happen that they just didn't have time to flesh out. I mean, it ends with Paul saying like, I offering to marry the emperor's daughter because of the political move of it. And really what gets the focus is that Zendaya's, hurt by it. And it's like, okay, that is interesting. And that's where if it was 3 movies, I would love 20 minutes on like the fallout of that and him coming to that conclusion that that's what he has to do and being conflicted and torn by it.
And it just happened.
But it just, honestly, once he drank the blue goo, he became just like, we stopped getting conflicted Paul and he was just
bad guy.
And you know what? Maybe that's more interesting. Maybe that'll grow on me that like, hey, this is a character they didn't bother like with trying to make sure you were okay with every movie made by showing you the conflict, and
That's
just
fair.
like,
Yeah.
and now he's just the focused war guy. But
It just felt like it happened kind of fast
It
and
did.
suddenly. And to me, I'll just go ahead and get into it. The blue goo thing, I'm not familiar with the book. So just let me say that right off the bat.
yes,
So maybe that is built-in lore from the book, and I'm not treating it fairly. It just felt like too easy of a. It's just like I don't know, some blue goo and you drink it, and now you're bad or kind of bad. That was all. I'm like you. I don't need everything spelled out for me, but that was like, so wait, you drink it, you're bad, or you're. I don't know. That just felt confusing, and it just felt like a plot device to me.
yeah. There were a lot of, like, again, I don't want to be nitpicking guy because it's a sci-fi movie. We're not going to understand everything,
Mm-hmm.
but they go through the trouble of showing you like how hard it is to get to ride a worm, which makes sense. It should be really hard to ride a worm.
Mm-hmm.
But then like all these people, all the freemen are traveling constantly like in caravans on the worms, and you're like, how did you get everybody on that worm?
Yeah.
How do they dismount from the worm?
Right.
Like these are things that like I really wanted to see. Like just show me how you explain that to me, because it was like a near-death experience for him to get on a worm and
Yeah.
start riding, which makes sense. So how do you get all the people on the worm?
Yeah.
How do you get all the people off the worm?
Yeah.
Like and again, I know that's like nitpicky. That's the sort of thing that people go like, just sit back and enjoy the movie. I get that. I couldn't stop thinking about it.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Yeah.
The blue goo stuff was annoying to me, and the Chalamet and Zendaya stuff. Like I said earlier, I think Zendaya is the one that shined in this movie. And so, but now I'm going to pick a little bit, but not on her, just because of the writing. Where I did feel like there was like so many scenes. Like if they're writing the movie, it's like, okay, Zendaya gives Chalamet an disapproving look. And I feel like there was like 9 scenes of her just kind of like looking at him like,
Yeah.
don't do this.
That's what I say. She's leaning into that like I can
She is.
I can play
But see,
grumpy really
but I don't
well.
blame her
Yeah.
for that
Right.
necessarily. It just felt like a gimmick. And I guess I just want to clarify. I'm just saying like, she just, not because of her performance necessarily, which I do think was good.
Yeah.
I just mean like she's got that star quality. And I just think the big spectacle of a movie up on the IMAX really benefited her.
For sure.
But, there was just a lot of like, another disapproving look from Zendaya towards Chalamet.
Yeah. What did you think about Walken playing the Emperor?
I found it a little distracting.
That's kind of,
And I guess that's really not fair because Walken's
Right.
Walken, but I think, like because of Saturday Night Live or all these different people who do Walken impressions, you do worry. It's like, has he just almost become more of a distraction? And also it just was like, all right, Walken, don't change anything about yourself, but here's this black robe. And
Yeah.
like, that was not an interesting character to me.
right. Talk about underdeveloped characters.
Yeah, like
again, it's maybe I think Walken's still a really good and interesting actor.
No, I do
think
too.
he's overshadowed by the fact that he's walking.
He's Walken, yeah.
Everybody knows how he talks. He talks like Walken.
Yeah.
And because his character, like I said, wasn't doing much, it made it hard to see anything but Walken.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, the Emperor, good, bad. Like, are we just supposed to feel nothing about the Emperor? Because if we're supposed to feel nothing, like mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished, yeah.
I don't know. Am I supposed to be like, boy, this is actually going to be trouble that Paul's taking over for him? This is a good thing. Is he getting his? And again, I think part of it's supposed to be the ambiguity. It's supposed to be one of those stories, almost like a Game of Thrones, where it's like, we're not telling you a story of good guys and bad guys and the good guys prevail. We're telling you a story of politics across the universe,
Yep,
just
and
shifting
morally
and
conflicted
changing.
people,
Yes.
and sure.
And like, I get that. I just wish I had a little better idea of where any of them stand on any of it.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and so Florence Pugh's his daughter in that
Yeah.
movie, and that wasn't interesting really at all. You're like, oh, Florence Pugh, she's
Yeah.
good.
Honestly, her character was just sort of
she just stood there a
and-
lot.
she was an exposition machine with her little like diary she was keeping.
Yes.
And she's the one who has the key line for Austin Butler's character where they say something about him and she goes, he's a psychopath. And it's like, that's the character development they give
Yeah.
him, is they just need the audience to know, hey, this guy we're about to show you, psychopath.
Yep, absolutely. No, Walken, he didn't hurt the movie necessarily,
Right.
but if ever there was a time maybe where if you really wanted to cast Walken, he needed to have, maybe like a scar of some kind, or he wore a mask. It was like something to just, not a gimmick necessarily, but just something so you're not just looking at Walken up on the screen.
Yeah.
Like maybe he could have used some kind of distraction or something.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I don't have like a great suggestion of like maybe they should have gone with somebody else instead, this person or that person. I don't again because I don't know what they were going for with that character.
I
You
don't
know, if
either.
you want to tell me that you wanted somebody menacing, I could maybe give you some suggestions for menacing. If you
Right,
want to tell
but
me
are they
you want
going for
somebody
that?
like who looks kind of like old and likable, were we supposed to look at him and go like, you know, was that the stunt casting? People like Walken. Let's put Walken in the role and people will like him. I don't know what they were going for.
I don't either. And I'm willing with anything, any criticism I have of this movie, I'm willing to see it out until then. From what I understand, they want to do a third movie, and I think our friend Dennis wants that to be the last movie. That's what I read.
And
so I am willing to, to come back to this and be like, okay, now I do see what they were going for in the big picture.
Yeah, and absolutely, if they get a third movie, like I said, I watched this and my first thought was they needed 3, and maybe if they get a third, and it will allow them to explain some of this out, and everything they're putting in motion will get to play out. Then
right,
I'll feel much more satisfied with this one.
Right.
But there was definitely a moment where I was like, kind of doing the math in my head, looking at my watch, going, "Oh no, there's only like 20 minutes left in this movie, and they've got a lot to wrap up."
So I did the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I just peeked at my phone once really quickly because I was curious. I was like, I feel like I've been in here for quite a while, and there's a lot of things just kind of up in the air still. And when I looked, there was like 12 minutes left in the movie, and I was like, uh-oh.
Yeah. And it's, again, my friend that I'm going to reference for the third time now leaned over to me at one point and goes, is this part 2 of 3? And I go, I think it's supposed to be the last one. He goes, I just need to prepare myself. This is going to be a cliffhanger. Because he was thinking the same thing. Like, there's no way we're getting close to resolution here.
Right.
And it does definitely end on a note that makes you go, like, if they left it open for a third, for sure.
For sure.
But I don't know. It still felt like that last act really rushed through.
Mm-hmm. I agree completely.
Yeah,
I agree. Ultimately, I just wrote, this is something I wrote, and this is not jumping ahead. I think this goes along with what you're saying. I just wrote, I found myself more interested in kind of the visuals and the unfolding of the world and the spectacle than I did in what was actually going on in the movie.
Absolutely. And
I mean, that ultimately sums it up for me.
And that just gets back to that's why it's more Avatar 2 than Lord of the Rings 2 to me, is because I loved the visuals and the visual storytelling of Avatar 2. And just like Avatar 1, I don't think I'll ever revisit it. I think I'll revisit this Dune movie.
Yeah, I would like to see it again.
I don't think it will become a regular rotation movie.
Right.
If it's not going to be like Terminator 2 where I watch it 30 times.
Oh my gosh.
Which I probably have watched Terminator 2 30 times at this point in my life.
And after seeing it, I want to watch it 30 more times.
Right. Because, and part of that is it's long. It's not a real breezy movie. We talked about Terminator 2, how it just moves.
Yeah.
It never drags at any point. I don't think this movie felt like it was dragging when I was watching it, but I could see how rewatches there'd be sections where I'm like, okay, we're dragging. This is the part where he's got to prove himself to the Freemen, and it's 30 minutes in the desert of him learning their skills that I just don't need to watch again.
Right.
But then again, I get to the action set pieces. It's not like, oh, here comes the great fight that I love. So I'm not really sure what the rewatch value is, other than maybe picking up on little different story things that I didn't pick up on the first time. I think that's probably the best use of a rewatch with this one. And this is probably one that like there'll be YouTube videos like explaining, here's what you missed because you didn't read the book or
you
something
don't understand
like that will make it, and I'll watch those videos and be like, oh, that is interesting, and I'm always open to a movie like this growing on me over time if I learn things about it that make me help me enjoy it more.
Yeah, that's really well put. I would agree with that. But I got to say, I just don't have that sense that this is what is going to happen with this movie.
Yeah. So kind of ultimately where I'm landing with this is I wouldn't be surprised if we get to the end of the year and I have this on like my top 5 movies of the year, like at number 5.
Yeah. I was going to say
not number 1, but maybe number 5. I don't think I will look at this one as fondly as I look back on Dune 1 even.
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird now because I'm like, well, this kind of taint my opinion of Dune 1 because I look back and again, like so much of what was built up in Dune 1 is kind of undone in Dune 2. But honestly, Dune 1's kind of a similar thing because when I rewatched Dune 1 at home, I really enjoyed it, but I was like, not quite the same as my theater experience. So I, started this way, saying it over and over again. I'm going to say it again. Love this movie.
Yeah.
Love the experience. Could be number 5 on my top 5 movies coming the end of the year. It's not going to be number 1.
Nope.
It's not going to be rewatched all the time.
So that was one of my very first thoughts was I was thinking about us in this podcast, and I was like, well, nope, not number 1.
Yeah.
No, actually, what I thought, I kind of walking out of the theater, and I was like, okay, my number 1 slot is still open.
Yeah.
Because you go into something like this with a lot of hype, and you're thinking, am I going to leave this and be like, somebody's going to have to knock this out at number 1 for me?
Right.
That's how I left Killers of the Flower Moon, where I was like, and same with Oppenheimer. First Oppenheimer, where you're like, something's going to have to knock this out of number 1. We've now got a contender. And this one I was like, nope, not the one.
Yeah.
And I kind of have the same thought. Maybe it'll creep into top 5. Honestly, and I don't mean this as a slam on this movie, though. I hope it doesn't.
Yeah.
Because I hope there's 5 better movies that, I doubt we'll see 5, more visually compelling movies or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I hope there's 5 movies that come out that I connect with more and I want to revisit more.
Yeah. And movies like this are hard to rank because it was the same way with Avatar: Way of Water, where I got to the end of the year and I was like, looking at the scores I gave it, it was one of my top 5 scores of the year. I know. But I don't feel like it's one of my top 5 favorite movies of the year.
I know.
It was just one of my top 5 experiences of the year. All that said, if Dune Part 3 comes out, I'll be there opening weekend.
Absolutely.
In the IMAX, excited to see it.
Absolutely. One note I did make that I'm going to switch it back to positive a little bit. I did write, to me, this is a more interesting, let's say this is a trilogy. Mm-hmm. To me, this will turn into a more interesting, more of what I want trilogy. It'd be like my Star Wars.
Yeah.
Did you think that?
Yeah, I would say that.
Empire Strikes Back vibes?
I definitely like it more than Star Wars.
Yeah. Like I was thinking like this, I don't want to say they're similar, but it's like you're telling.
Well, they are. Like George Lucas was even inspired by Dune, I believe,
there you go.
When he wrote Star Wars.
So you're telling a big.
I think that's right.
I'm sure.
All the nerds will come after me if I'm wrong. But you know
Star Wars.
I don't care, nerds.
Yeah, I don't care, nerds. You can't beat me up. But. And there's things about the original Star Wars trilogy, New Hope, Empire, Return of the Jedi, that I like. Mm-hmm. I'm not anti-Star Wars necessarily. But I'm like, this is more what I'm interested in. It's more visually interesting to me. Mm-hmm. It's way better acting. Yeah. So I was like, I like that aspect of it, where I'm like, I'm inhabiting a world. I'm taken to a place and a time, and it's different, and it's visually compelling. So, to me, I was like, this is like, to me, a better, almost like a more prestige with a better filmmaker, Star Wars.
Here's a question for you. What was this movie rated?
I would say PG-13.
I honestly don't know, which is a weird thing to say after a movie.
Because there's no cussing, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say, I think my instinct would have been like, probably R, because Denis Villeneuve just tends to make movies for adults, and those usually are. But I'm looking back on it going,
that's a really good question.
There's not a lot there's some violence, but not a lot of blood.
The violence is pretty safe. It's like, he slashed that guy's throat, and then he just falls, but you don't see
it's like
him.
Off screen.
It's off screen, basically. There was a little bit of a romantic situation with Zendaya and Chalamet, but not an R-rated.
Right.
Not R-rated at all. It's got to be PG-13, I guess.
It is PG-13. I just looked it up.
Sci-fi action and
yeah. Which, again, will definitely help contribute to its box office success.
And I checked before I came over here. It had a huge opening weekend.
Yeah.
But I was looking at the Wikipedia page, like, literally like 10 minutes before I came over here, and it's like, Wikipedia. Mm-hmm. Wikipedia is Wikipedia. But it was like, reception, and it was like, Dune Part 2 opened to rave reviews, with some calling it one of the greatest sequels of all time. And that, again, falls under that, like, Austin Butler is one of the greatest villains of all time, where you're going, whoa. Like, let's, it's okay for a movie to just be really good and a really great spectacle. I don't think we need to start throwing around greatest of all time, greatest sequels of all time.
Yeah. I mean, again, when we get to the Academy Awards for this year, I think it'll get nominations.
Mm-hmm. You're right, though. No acting.
There will be no acting nominations. I think it'll get nominated for Best Picture like the first one did, but I think it will be in the latter half of ones even really considered. Where it could get some real things is visual effects, cinematography, maybe even director for Dennis.
It might.
But, we'll have to compare it to what else comes out, obviously.
Yeah. I don't think it's going to be taking a big chunk out of the Oscars.
No. And again, not that even makes what what makes a movie
Oh,
great.
definitely not.
But you know, just as the critics are singing its praises, I think those
They
same
are.
critics, when it comes time to honor movies, is not going to be looking at this movie
I don't think so.
as that level.
Hey, I got a question for you about this movie. What do you think of them throwing Anya Taylor-Joy in there?
I thought it was interesting because I didn't know that beforehand. I know some people
didn't either.
had it. I guess it had leaked and spoiled that she was in it. But when it like turned, I think just the fact that it was somebody I knew, I was like turned and I kind of whispered out loud like, "It's Anya Taylor-Joy."
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I think you know most people I've seen the movie with would have no idea who that is.
Yeah, I just wondered because to me it's like, well, now I just want to see her on
Yeah.
screen because I'm already looking forward to Furiosa, and I had seen the Furiosa trailer before that, and they just throw her in there for literally like about 10, 20 seconds probably.
Yeah,
Like, I mean, that is a cameo.
What I don't know is so throughout the movie, the mother who's pregnant with her is having like conversations with the fetus.
Yeah.
Was that Anya Taylor-Joy's voice
I don't
for the
know.
fetus? And I'm like, because I hadn't thought about like, is this
Yeah.
a voice I recognize? And then I saw her face, like, oh, it's her. So afterwards, was like, was I hearing her voice?
Right.
Like, was there a clue there? Did she
Yeah,
voice
I
over,
don't
or was
know.
it just something totally separate?
Yeah.
So I don't know. But yeah, it'd be great if there's a Dune 3 and she's in it.
She's in it, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of hers. I
Yeah,
think
me
she's
too.
great.
Me too.
Yeah. Yeah, is there anything else we haven't touched on that we need to?
So sure, I wrote, gave me some Empire Strikes Back vibes.
Yeah.
I guess one of my biggest takeaways is just like I said too, all these criticisms and stuff, and I'm happy to be proven wrong if and when a Dune 3 comes out and if that completes the story and everything.
Yeah.
But
I did have one more gripe, and this is one that goes back to, if it was in the book, I get why it's in there because it's in the book, but I just didn't like it. It was the weird little twist where Paul turns out is like a Harkonnen or whatever, the bad guy. Like I didn't even really understand what they were getting at when he's like, did my father know? And she's like, I didn't even know. And you're like, wait, what? What do you?
Yeah.
What? Like, so I didn't understand that.
I didn't either. And it's kind of like you're already being thrust into this world where you're not given all the information, and that just muddies the water even more.
It did.
So it's like, now I have to figure out whose parent is who.
Yeah. And that's part of the, like, where everything got rushed and didn't get to breathe anymore. It's like, maybe if that had, like, you had taken some time to, like, explore the implications of that even a little bit. But really the most that came of it was when, before he dueled the other guy, he calls him cousin.
Yeah.
And the guy's just like, cousin? Well, you won't be the first family member I've killed.
Yeah.
And it's like, well,
that didn't amount to a whole lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Like, again, I enjoy this movie. And maybe, again, I always want to leave the door open because I watched this last night. Not a huge amount of time to process.
Sure.
These are all, like, pretty immediate reactions. If I watch it again, and I probably will. I'll probably go see this in the theater again because
I'd like to see it one more time.
Because it's such a theatrical experience.
For sure.
I'd rather catch it again on a big screen than wait for it to come home. And maybe I'll pick up on a lot of things I missed the first time and it'll connect the dots and I'll be like, okay, all this makes more sense than I realized the first time through. So it's entirely possible.
It is. Ultimately, I just want to say, like I said at the opening, love this movie. And then we proceeded to say all the things we didn't love about it. I did love this movie. I loved the spectacle. I loved being back in the theater for a movie I was excited about. It's great up on the screen. So I like you say, I'm in complete agreement with you. I don't want to leave anybody with a bad taste in their mouth or be a part of that about this movie.
Yeah.
Because it's good. It's interesting. There's stars everywhere and they're fun to watch up on the screen and all that stuff. We're here to be real and be honest about our reactions to movies.
Yeah. And to echo what you've already said, there's nothing wrong with a movie being exactly what this one was. Not every movie needs to check every single box for us and what we like and what we would prefer.
Right.
And it doesn't mean they're bad. It doesn't. It
just meant I meant just like I said, it just doesn't crack that upper whatever percent or upper level of movies for me. I'm really glad I saw it. It was really cool to see on the IMAX. I like it when a movie is making my seat shake, and this one was. Some of a couple of the battle scenes and then the worms and stuff. I'm all for that. Really happy I saw it. Really good movie. Always great to see big stars up on the IMAX screen and a lot of people in this movie with a really bright future. And I'm sure they'll all be in a lot of movies that we'll talk about on this podcast over time.
Yeah. And my last note, I think, because I have a tendency to say my last note when it's not my last note, is it was just good to see a crowded theater again.
Yep.
It's been a while since I've been to the theater and had the experience of like, there's actually a ticket taker.
Yeah.
Because most theaters have been so empty. You go up to the concessions counter and they print and rip your ticket and say, just go. And you're like, could I have just walked in and nobody would have stopped me? They had security there because there was enough people. For the first time in a long time, because I was sitting in the center of an aisle, I was like, if I need to go to the bathroom or do anything, it's going to be hard for me to get out. So I better just be here to sit and stay, which is a nice feeling to have. Like,
it is.
Again, when I went and saw Madam Web in the exact same theater, I was literally the only person. I could have done whatever I wanted. And this one, I'm surrounded by people. And it's been a while since I've had that experience.
I saw it Friday at noon in the IMAX, and I bet there was 100 people in there. I'll say this too, in my theater, when that movie ended, people clapped. I mean, good for them. You know, obviously it was satisfying to these other people that were in the theater with me for whatever reason. So I want I've said this before on here. I'll say it again. I want movies to succeed.
Yes.
I want theaters to thrive.
Yeah.
And so if Dune is giving that to people, and the people that I saw it by myself, so with all these people that are in the theater that I don't know, if they wanted to clap after that movie, I'm happy for them.
Yeah, the box office definitely needed something to come along because it's been a few weeks of just.
Oh yeah,
it's probably been about a month of just really bad box office, starting with like Argyle and
Madam Web is just putting up embarrassing numbers.
Several, just people were not going to the movies, and so it's great to see people coming back to the movies.
Yep, absolutely. So I would absolutely recommend people. I would absolutely recommend this movie to people.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Our criticisms aside, it looks great. I know we've said that a million times. I'll say it 1,000,001 times. It looks great up on the screen. And, you get to be thrust into a world. And like you said, and I do want to make this point. I know we never can wrap up, can we? It's like all of our criticisms and our character development or lack of character development. But there is something to be appreciated about a movie. I think you're right. It's not a traditional, I was good and now I'm bad. I was bad, now I'm, it's this big story, and it's almost political in a way. And it's about kind of morally ambiguous people in a way. And, we can complain a lot about movies being boring or cliched. And
yes,
I will say, I do appreciate that, even if it does leave you as an audience member a little unsatisfied. So.
Very well said. So I'll leave it with this. Everyone, if you see this movie, which I think most people will, let us know what you think. Yeah. Let us know if you were like, that's exactly what I wanted out of the movie.
I would love to hear from like a hardcore Dune fan.
Yeah.
Who can be like, no, guys, here's what you don't understand. This and this, and maybe the mysterious blue goo means way more than I think it does. I'm all ears.
Yeah. And let us know what you think, and we appreciate you joining us this week. Maybe a week hiatus for us. I'll be out of town.
You'll be out of town.
So we may have a week hiatus. But we got you an extra episode this past week with our Terminator episode.
A live. It was so funny. I listened to that, and I was thinking to myself, why did I keep turning on my turn signal? Because you can just hear my turn signal. Okay, I do feel like we would be remiss, even though we did an episode about it, how awesome it was to go see Terminator 2 in the theater. Was that not so great? That was just a great decision. That was a movie we did go see together, just you and I.
Yeah.
That was incredible.
It was a great experience. I think I need to make a list of old movies that I want to see in theaters, like a top 10. Because honestly, I'll probably include in that list 2 that I can check off thanks to this, past several months. Die Hard and Terminator 2.
Oh my god.
But I've been able to check off that list and probably have 8 more and just have fun waiting for those opportunities to check those off.
That was so satisfying to watch that in the theater. I'm glad we did that.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us this week.
See you sometime.
Sometime.
No more than a week or two, and then we'll be back.
That's right.
Yep.